Let's take a little time to reveal the prehistoric stories that the earth once concealed. Mix them all together on this ancient land. It's time to spread some Palaeo Jam.
Hello, welcome to this edition of Palaeo Jam. My name's Malcolm Mills. I am the host, and I'm several metres underground in the Stick Tomato Cave at Naracoorte, and I'm with Nicola Bail. Hi, Nicola.
Hi.
I'm with Narita Turner.
Hi.
And I'm with Georgia Blows.
Hello, nice to meet everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Be here, stuck together. It's almost like we were talking just before we started recording. It's almost like sitting underground, like a little campfire.
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah.
Isn't it? Is. But we all have a connection to caves. And what I wanted to talk about today, and we're here because National Science Week have said, yes, can you go around places, Michael, and talk to people? And wanted to come down to Naracoorte because it's such an important part of my I guess, engagement with communities and from where my character, Professor Flint, was kind of partly born from the creatures here. But I want to talk to each of you about your connection to the caves and how it relates to your careers. So maybe, Nicola, so you study caves as existing ecosystems. You're not a paleontologist.
No, I'm not a paleontologist. So I'm an ecologist or zoologist, and I study the bats that live in caves. At the moment, it's southern betwing bats. I also do a bit of work with other bats, but my connection with caves was pretty much started once I started studying the species and I visited Naracoorte for the first time and realised that everyone here knows what a diprotodon is and everyone here loves bats. And yeah, I was like, oh, awesome. I get to work here for the next couple of years on and off, so it's been great.
So was it bats or caves that came first? Or
it was bats that came first for me. So I started doing a bit of wildlife rescue a few years ago when I was living in Melbourne, started working with bats then and really fell in love with bats just because I saw how much people didn't like them. And I saw, how amazing they are, and the fact that about 20% of our mammals are bats and people can't tell you anything about them.
20%?
Yeah. And in some countries, about a quarter of their mammal species are. They're, after rodents, I think the most widespread or abundant group of mammals. They're on every continent but Antarctica. But all people can really say about them is that they're spooky and they carry disease. And yeah, so it's like I'd like
mammals
to change
that fly. I swear. So in Adelaide, we get the flying foxes in the Adelaide Botanic Garden. And you see them at twilight and they go out searching for food. Yeah. And I swear the birds are sitting in the trees going, what?
Yeah.
What? Mammal? What?
And that's essentially...
You're not supposed to be able to do that.
And that's why they're so successful as well, because there's nothing else flying around at night. There's nothing really like eating our nocturnal insects apart from bats. Like, that's what most bats eat. And, they're just doing things that no one else is doing at night. So overseas and in the tropics, sort of, you'll get some flowers that will only sort of bloom at night because they only want bats to come and pollinate them, and they'll sort of evolve along with bats, so bats get longer noses and the flowers get sort of longer, and they just really complement each other. So they've been here for a very long time, and they've just evolved to do all these crazy different things along with nature. So
and they're very, very cool.
Yeah, they are.
They're very cool. All right, okay, so Narita, you're the paleontologist in the group, and obviously Naracoorte Caves, World Heritage Site, is known for the paleontological side of the caves. So what's your story that brought you here, in the sense of what does your research involve?
Yeah, so I'm studying the Pleistocene large animal fossils of the Naracoorte Caves, and I'm specifically interested in the different ways that those large animals accumulated in the caves.
So that means how they got here.
Yeah. How
they got here, because you go to somewhere like Victoria Cave and there's fossils everywhere and there's bones everywhere. So how do they get from up above, like we've got this big pile of dirt and rocks above our heads, how did they get from up there into the cave? So that's the nature of the research?
Yeah, and it's really important for us to understand those processes because they can end up biasing the fossil records that we look at, and then that can have a whole lot of flow-on effects for our interpretations about prehistoric environments.
Because, of course, different animals or different kinds of animals bring things in different ways, don't they?
Yeah. So bats are really important for the fossil story.
That's 2 for Team Bat.
there are certain species of bats. So ghost bats have the capacity to accumulate small animal bones in caves. Owls and birds of prey also accumulate small things. So I'm not super focused on those, but there are large mammal carnivores as well that can bring large animals into caves. So things like Tasmanian devils could have done that.
Yeah, and working out the difference between the different kinds of things that do that.
Yeah.
And also understanding, and coming back to you, Nicola, that the caves, they're fossil deposits, but they're also living ecosystems.
Yeah.
And Georgia, your job is to bring people into the caves, like you brought us in here, hopefully take us back out again at the end.
Yeah, that's the plan.
That's the plan.
But I do hear there's bats in here.
So we're going to stay here for quite some time.
And bones as well.
Okay, so you work at the Naracoorte Caves.
I do, yes.
How did you come to be? So you're what's your? So you're an interpretive officer.
Yeah, so I am a site interpreter, and part of that is to bring the amazing research that Verita and Nicola are doing and deliver it to the public in a really fun, enjoyable way for them to understand about what is happening here at Naracoorte.
Because it is, isn't it? And it's, I suppose it's partly similar to what I do as Prof Flint, where you rely on the research. You don't get to do the stuff without the amazing research that the paleontologists and other researchers, that sounds bad, doesn't it? Paleontologists and the others. There's the paleontologists and all the other researching people. But we don't get to do... I mean, you could still do a guided tour, but it wouldn't have that content that it has because of the information that we get from these folk.
No, we definitely rely heavily on the research that's happening here at Naracoorte and what Narita and Liz and Nicola are doing, and it's telling the story about what's happening here at Naracoorte for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah, and so we're all from places other than Naracoorte. But you, Georgia, are from here.
Yeah,
so you went to primary school here, you went to high school here. We were talking before we started about maybe you might have seen me as Professor Flint when you were a very small person.
Yeah, well, being from Naracoorte, a big part of growing up in this town is the Naracoorte Caves. So there was a lot of surrounding, education at school. There was a lot of focus on the fossils, Naracoorte, seeing Professor Flint perform with his amazing songs. And it sort of shaped where I wanted to take my future career, and obviously I've ended up here.
Yeah, so, and you understand you when it came to doing work experience, the caves are where you did your work experience?
Yes, yep.
So you've grown up under the wing of Professor Flint.
The wing membrane.
The wing membrane. There's always a bat reference.
Yeah.
There's always, so you've done that. And of all the things you could have done as work experience, there's something, but it doesn't always resonate with people, does it? Like the things that resonate with us, and I suppose it's something for all of us to talk about. What is it for you that resonated, that you've gone, I want my work experience in the caves, and then having done that work experience, that's where I want to work? Because you're not doing a PhD like these two. You're not doing the research, so it's a different pathway, which is really cool.
Yeah. So why I wanted to work at the caves, it was the connection to the public. So being able to take all this amazing research and education and give it to them in a really enjoyable package, and you can just see when they can connect with you. They can see them understanding, and they start to get the story of Naracoorte. Understand what was happening here up above the ground for thousands of years. That was a big part of why I wanted to work here as well. You have all these amazing animals that are no longer with us, like Thylacoleo and Diprotodon. These animals, they were alive. They were walking around on the surface in your own backyard, not very long ago at all when you think about it.
And that's part of the coolness of here. And we talked with some kids at the primary school yesterday about that very thing of I'm often in Adelaide talking about diprotodons and things and saying, oh, they migrated, they would have walked through here. But in Naracoorte, this is where we find the stuff. So there's something very special about the proximity of the fossils. And the bats.
Yeah, I learnt about Diprotodon and other megafauna in my undergrad, and then sort of got really interested in them. Like, I have a shirt at home that says "Bring back megafauna," and then on the back it says "I miss my big friends." But I had that before I started coming here. So I mean, the first time I came here, I was like, oh, they've got this massive Diprotodon out the front. There's all of these fossils, like all of these megafauna, and like such a rich history. And there's an amazing colony of bats as well. So I felt that's very special to me as well, but I'm definitely not the most knowledgeable on paleontology.
Yeah.
But
it's not only a connection to the past, it's also a connection to what's happening now with the animals around Naracoorte and what could possibly happen in the future as well.
Yeah.
So looking at the past fossil record, what we used to find here at Naracoorte and comparing it to what we find now. So the past paleodiversity versus what's happening now.
So, Narita, what was it for you? Like, how did you come to be down here in a cave with us, talking about your work, your research? What was it that the light bulb was there a particular moment that you remember, or was it an accumulation?
Yeah.
See what I did? It was an accumulation of knowledge. There's no off switch here.
I like all my life, I think I've wanted to be a paleontologist. That's sort of always been a dream of mine.
You were the dinosaur kid, weren't you?
I was the dinosaur kid, still am. But I moved to Adelaide to do my undergrad. At the time, there was a major in paleontology offered, and I came to the caves for the first time in third year of uni, and started, I guess, the research even then, doing projects on it then. And there was just a really natural progression from then on into honours and then PhD.
So when you came here for the first time, so I'm getting this. So you've got the degree to come here in paleo. So that's an easy choice for the dinosaur kid. But once you walk into the caves for the first time. Like when you walk into Victoria Cave for the first time and you see the fossil beds there, what's that like?
It's pretty mind-blowing. It's not really something I'd seen before anywhere else. I really liked the applications of quaternary paleontology as well. I thought that kind of separated it from older paleontology, like older time periods. And I've always been passionate about conservation and things like that, and I really liked the ability to use the knowledge from the fossil record to better inform things like conservation.
So, back onto bats. Yes. What do we learn from a place like the caves?
So,
in terms of that conservation and in terms of vulnerability of bat species.
We learn a lot at a lot of different scales. So broadly, we learn a lot about extinctions, past mass extinction events from fossil records, and there's a lot of evidence that we're in a mass extinction at the moment. And then in terms of bats, so here at the caves, we've learnt that Naracoorte Caves is a very special site for southern bentwing bats. And these guys
Mammal of the Year last year.
2022 Mammal of the Year, the inaugural Mammal of the Year.
Nothing will ever take that away. Inaugural.
Exactly. And there is fossil evidence of bats in these caves from 500,000 years ago, but we know with the southern bentwing bat, the past 200 years are the years that have led them to become critically endangered, and they've declined significantly. we can see from the fossil record that that has not been the case for a long time. We can see from sort of historic records of what the population used to be like here that it wasn't the same. But one sort of continued theme is that Bat Cave, which is the maternity site for southern bentwing bats within Naracoorte Caves National Park, is an extremely important cave. It's one of the only 2 places in the world that southern bentwing bats will reproduce. It hosts the largest population of them there, and that's because of the cave properties itself. So the cave's a really warm and humid one, and you sort of walk in and you just get hit with this wall. And that's also aided by the bats, because bats have ridiculously high energy requirements. So when they're flying around the cave, they're generating a lot of heat, and that gets trapped in the ceiling. And this is all sort of a cooperative effort of all the different groups. So even the males and non-breeding members will come back and fly around. And we think that's to probably heat up the cave a bit, because when the pups are born, mums actually leave them on the roof of the cave in this really warm and humid sort of environment like an incubator. And that means mum can go out and forage, because lactating bats just, they're really, really struggling to meet those energy requirements, water requirements and calcium requirements. So without Bat Cave, southern bentwing bats would really, we wouldn't have a South Australian population. I don't know what the state of the normal, the entire population would be, because this is the largest colony that they form. So it's a very, very special place, and there's really no other like it. There's a lot of caves in the area, but there's only one cave that the southern bentwing bats will use to give birth in. So
It's fascinating, isn't it? Like a
maternity cave.
A maternity cave.
Yeah.
I kept thinking as you were talking, it's like, what?
It's like a maternity
cave.
ward
It's
at
like
a hospital.
It's like,
instead of having them all in their little humidity cribs, it's just the whole cave's warm, the whole cave's humid, and, the pups are just on the ceiling, all in their little crate, which is what we call it, and then they grow up to adult
the mums
size.
just stick the babies on the cell.
Yep.
Imagine humans doing that. Like the mums just
nice.
stick the I'm going
Going
shopping.
out to eat, bye.
Going out for lunch with the girls.
Yeah.
I would just put the kids on the wall in the cave.
Their baby in a crowd of hundreds.
Yeah, and mum proceeds to go out and eat 80% of her body weight in food and come back to her pup. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
So, Georgia, you're constantly engaging with the public, and that's part of what I do. And the other two, they do a bit of that, don't you? I mean, but this is public engagement, and you do talks and things and stuff. What is it about engaging this stuff with the public for you that's the buzz?
It's that people can walk away from the caves knowing that there is so much more going on here than just what meets the eye. It's not just a cave, it's got so much going on down here. It really is alive. It's its own special little ecosystem with all different types of, bacteria, microorganisms. Bats rely on the caves, owls rely on the caves. And it's bringing this topic we call cave conservation and driving it home. So getting them to care about what's happening here at Naracoorte, the animals that rely on the caves, why we need to protect and preserve the caves. Because if we didn't have what we have here today with, a national park and more particularly a World Heritage Site, who knows what could have happened.
Yeah, and just simple things like the balance. I'm always reticent to use balance in nature because it's not so much a balance, it's usually a struggle.
Yeah, it's always
and
a
it's
trade-off.
a perception of balance because we have a very tiny understanding of time. But the fragility of the maternity cave. But Narita, coming to your research, these things as death traps. What do we know about the degree to which things fell in and died, or died and were brought in?
Yeah, so the death trap sort of caves, we call those pitfall trap caves, they're definitely the most common type of cave that has large animal bones at Naracoorte. So we think that was happening a lot more than the other possibility of animals dying elsewhere and then being carried in.
Because it's probably pretty hard to kill a diprotodon and then drag it in here.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, a diprotodon's probably going to, whoa, fall down a hole.
But not very often at Naracoorte because a lot of the holes would have been too small for them to fall down. So diprotodon is not really actually all that common at places like Naracoorte.
Yeah. But there are thylacoleo bones
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. So
in
they're
the caves. So what does that tell us about them? Because they were, as an apex predator, that we find lots of thylacoleo bones.
That they were awesome.
Well, there's that,
yeah. So usually
they ate bats. Yeah. Uh-oh, somebody's blocking her ears. Yeah. What is that?
Yeah, we're in like a normal sort of community that we see today. Apex predators are usually present in quite small numbers relative to their prey. Some caves at Naracoorte do seem to have particularly high numbers of thylacoleo in sort of numbers that we might not expect from a natural population. That happens in, other caves as well. So it could tell us something about their vulnerability to pitfall entrapment. There's quite a few instances we think of carnivores being attracted to the entrances of these pitfall trap caves by the smell of trapped or decaying animals. So
it's like a little supermarket, really, isn't it?
Well, we think what happened, they might have been attracted to these cave entrances. Ooh, something smells good in there, and then fall in and then end up becoming victims themselves.
Right, so it's not a thing that they came down here, like they didn't bring prey with them.
They might have. So it all just depends on the morphology of the cave. So that's a big indicator of what the accumulation mode would have been.
So when you say the morphology of the cave,
so that's like the shape of the cave. That encompasses the size, the possible entrances,
How
as
easy
well.
it was to access.
Yeah, from both outside and from inside the cave.
Because if I was a thylacoleo and there was an opportunity to have a nice little house like we're in at the moment, this really cool alcove. So, by the way, listener, we actually had to crawl on our bellies and I hit my head, but I got a special hat, special helmet on. So we crawled on our bellies to get into where we are. Because surely it's not just bats that live in caves.
Oh, no, it's not just bats. I mean, there's an entire ecosystem that thrives in bats' poo. Like, there's
so much
I
going
think
on
particularly
here.
for insects and arthropods, even at Naracoorte, the southern bentwing bats at Naracoorte have different ectoparasites to the other populations as well.
An ectoparasite.
Yeah, so they have little parasitic flies that live in their fur. And they sort of just drink their blood like a flea or anything for a dog. But the ones at Naracoorte are different to other southern bentwing bat populations. And, presumably in the 60s or 70s there were papers on this endemic to bat cave. Yeah. And then there's the Naracoorte cave cricket that I've met someone who's very passionate about that before. And, there's species of cave crickets that are endemic to here.
There's cave spiders.
There's, really, like, insects are just understudied in terms of animals worldwide. And that applies not as much to caves, but there are really just entire ecosystems that we don't think about when we walk around or just sit in a cave.
That are speciated to us specifically here at Naracoorte that you won't find anywhere else, which is really special and amazing.
Is one of the really cool things about caves, because they are they're enclosed. And there are places in Europe where there are species of like fish and amphibian things and frog and stuff that's like nowhere, anywhere. I want us to if because all of us, the caves, and we started talking about this at the beginning. All of us, our careers, the work that we do is intrinsically linked to somewhere like the Naracoorte Caves. Professor Flint was born partly developed during Paleontology Week, which started here in Naracoorte with the South Australian Museum. And we did a show where we had like hundreds of kids from all of the schools on the lawns around here. And so if you were to, each of you, starting with you, Georgia, if you were to give a young high school or a primary school kid some advice in terms of career involving the caves or career involving science, because while you're not doing the research like these two do, science is a key part of your career. What advice might you give to, or even to a younger you,
Do whatever makes you happy. Life's too short to worry about anything, super crazy. When I was in high school, I was a big, studier. I was set on going to university. That was the pathway that I was going to take. And then I just discovered it just wasn't for me. It was becoming really quite stressful for me. There wasn't much of a work-life balance. It was study, study, study. And if you don't study, you're not going to get, the scores you need to get into your degree. And I did apply for a paleontology degree and I did get accepted. But I really sat back and I thought, I want to do whatever makes me happy. And studying just wasn't doing it for me. And I couldn't see myself going to university and completing a degree. So I thought, what's the next best thing? And that is work. I love to work. I love to engage with people. And I thought Naracoorte Caves would be the place to be. I've grown up with it. So I applied and I'm lucky enough to have got the position and get to wake up every day and go to an amazing job.
It suits you well, the job.
It's a pretty cool place to do stuff in. And just to be sitting here underground recording this with the four of us here is pretty cool. Okay, Narita, what advice would you give to younger Narita?
Oh, I think really similar to what Georgia said. Just do what you love and don't be influenced by what other people are doing and what other people think is, appropriate or successful or, cool. Just do what makes you happy and you'll end up making a career out of that.
Yeah. It's people ask me, I sometimes speak at schools and the teachers say, so what was the career path, Michael? I was like, there wasn't one. It was just a series of choices in a moment of going, oh, that's cool, I'll do that. Oh, that's which very much follows what you're saying, Georgia, about do the thing you love. And sometimes it can be really hard. And sometimes, as a writer performer, hello COVID, like you have moments where you're sitting on the sofa going, right, I've got a mortgage and no income for the foreseeable future. I have no idea how that's going to pan out. So there are absolute challenges, but I've been able to find a way. Nicola?
Well, it's pretty much the same thing as what you guys have said. I think just follow the things that make you excited and anything that makes you feel very strong, that you feel really passionate about, that makes you excited, track that down, even if it's not necessarily a long-term plan, because everyone's sort of long-term plan is just to be happy and do something they think is important. So
yeah, it's I guess it's that thing of and we don't know why it is that a thing might individually resonate with us.
Yeah,
it just does.
Exactly. I think that's what makes us who we are as well, because everyone's got different interests. People in the same environment have completely different interests. It's what makes us all people and all interesting, I think.
Yeah, and it's that I often use the example of people like Michael Jordan. So Michael Jordan didn't become the greatest basketballer of all time because he thought, oh, what can I do to make lots of money? He became the greatest basketballer of all time because he just loved playing basketball.
Yeah, definitely.
And he loved playing basketball so much that he would train and play and do all the things. And I guess the four of us have done similar things, yeah?
Definitely.
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah. All right, we are rapidly getting towards the end of time.
That's not good.
Thank you. I think my legs haven't moved in this time, and they are completely numb.
Your feet too?
Your feet are numb. If you could tell people one more thing about the caves, and the theme might start any moment now, but what's your favourite thing to tell people about the caves?
People often become disconnected from the animals that lived thousands of years ago. They simply see them as bones now, but it's something really important to mention is that they were animals, they were alive, and I always love to tell people that they would have been alive down in the caves for however many days it took them to pass away.
To die. That's charming. But it is, because when we look at a fossil, but it was an individual.
Yeah.
It was an individual.
They had feelings.
Feelings. ancestors. Clearly no descendants. Yeah.
Mum and Dad.
Well,
and the brothers.
yeah. Well, that's the end.
Oh, okay.
Excellent.
Thank you very much to all of you for joining us on Palaeo Jam.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was great.
It's time to spread some Palaeo Jam.